Okay, the board went into executive session at 6:39 p.m. to discuss the appointment of an individual and/or interview candidates for vacant school board seat number 1 as authorized by 25 OS 307B1 and 70 OS 5-118. Present during the executive session were Joy Tribby, Shelley Colbert, Cameron Fields, and Greg Rock. No action was taken by the Board of Education. The board returned to open session at 7:25 p.m. This constitutes the minutes of the executive session. At this time, I would like to make a motion to appoint Scott Walker to the vacant school board seat number 1. Do I have a second? Second for Mr. Rock. This is Few.
Yes.
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 And Scott Walker, if you can come up. And thank you, Courtney, for your interest.
Okay. You got some reading to do. What do you want us to do with this atmosphere right here? Is this okay? Sure. I don't need that. All right. This is what we're fixing to read. So I'll start it, and I guess you can follow. I, Scott Walker,
I, Scott Walker,
hereby declare under oath
hereby declare under oath
that I will faithfully perform the duties
that I will faithfully perform the duties
of a member of the Board of Education
of a member of the Board of Education
of Independent School District
of Independent School District
number I-80
number I-80
of Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma,
of Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
all duties pertaining to
all duties pertaining to
said office
said office
and obey the Constitution
and obey the Constitution
and the laws of the United States and Oklahoma.
and the laws of the United States and Oklahoma.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Welcome, Scott. Have a seat. We're going to finish with the night. We will reorganize in April. So, moving on, is Carrie John here? Hi. Hello. He's going to come up and give us our 2021-2022 annual school audit.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. I want me in any particular place. Oh, Gary Bassman, CPA, and I'm here to give your audit presentation for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. I think y'all all have a booklet there maybe, and I'd kind of like to walk you through some of this if I could. I'm going to go real fast, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. I have a tendency to, I've done a lot of these and I like to go fast. Anyway, if you would turn over to page 1. Page 1 is the independent auditor's report. That's where I test the regional financial statements. It's about a 3-page report there that basically starts in by saying the type of opinion that we've issued. I'm sorry, can y'all all hear me again? In Oklahoma, about 98% of the school districts several years ago chose to be on the regulatory basis of accounting. And that's a little different than what generally accepted accounting principles is, but it's a little bit easier to understand. And it basically is more associated with cash transactions than it is accruals and what have you, receivables and payables. And that's the basis of accounting that McAllister is on. And we rendered a qualified opinion on the regulatory basis of accounting. The reason it was qualified is simply because of the fixed asset group of accounts. Here again, just like most of the school districts in the state of Oklahoma, you all don't have accurate historical records of your buildings, your land, and your equipment that we can feel good about putting in the financial statements. And so that's what the qualification is. The rest of the financial statements we found to be fairly stated and in good shape. It also talks here about an adverse opinion on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. That's just simply because y'all aren't on U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. As I mentioned before, you're on the regulatory based accounting. They make us put that in there just so readers will be, there won't be no uncertainty that you're not on generally accepted accounting principles. And so that's the opinion. We gave the opinion on a regulatory basis. The next page here goes into, talks a little bit about the responsibilities of management. Basically, you're responsible for the internal controls, the design and implementation of the internal controls that are relevant to the financial statements that we look at. Tells a little bit about the auditor's responsibilities right underneath there. Tells a little bit about how we plan and do a risk assessment and how we the process of our audit. It tells down there, it enumerates some things on how we have to use professional judgment in certain instances and kind of how we do a risk assessment. We audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. On this third page there, it talks about supplementary information. Well, we're going to look through this report in just a minute. You've got what's referred to as combined financial statements in the front. There's about 3 of those, and when it says combined, they just have some of the funds are combined. Then we have some notes to the financial statements after that. And then back behind the notes, there's what's called supplementary information. And what that is, it's some information that breaks down in a little more detail the combined financial statements, and also back there are your fiduciary fund information for your activity fund and your schedule of federal awards here at school. And basically this 2 paragraphs there at the top of that page 3 just simply says that we perform the same auditing procedures on that information as we did the combined financial statements. We found that to be fairly stated as well. The very last paragraph there, just alluding to 2 other reports that we have in here. One of them's on internal control, the other one's on your compliance with the federal programs that you participate in here at McAllister School District. We'll go over both those reports in just a minute. If you would then turn over to page 4. Page 4 is what I call a balance sheet. It's technically a combined statement of assets, liabilities, and fund balances. But it's got your fund, each column's got above it a fund or a fund type, they're called. And the general fund is by itself, it's the first column there. Special revenue would be in your special revenue fund, your building. If you had a child nutrition, a co-op, and insurance, that would all be considered to be in the special revenue group. You got your debt service, which is your sinking fund to retire your general obligation bonds and your debt. You've got capital projects, which is bond fund money that you, when you pass bonds and the money comes in, it sits in there for a while while you're building things or whatever you have planned for that particular money. And then you've got a general long-term debt column there that gives it shows all the debt of the district and how much you owe at June 30th, 22. But anyway, what this whole schedule does, it shows the cash in each one of those fund types, any liabilities against it. Then the next to the last line there at the bottom would be the fund balance at the end of the year, at the end of June of 22. The next schedule on page 5 is basically similar to an income statement. It's called Statement of Revenue, Expenditures, and Changes in Fund Balance, and it's set out again by fund type. You've got over on the left-hand side, you've got your revenues collected by, they break it down by local, intermediate, state, and federal. And your expenditures there are broken down by OCAS function code. And you can kind of look at that and see whether you took in more or less than you spent during the year and how it affected your fund balance down toward the bottom of the page. For instance, in your general fund, it looks like you collected $29,755,000 last year. You spent $29,149,000, so you spent $605 or nearly $606 less than you took in, and you had adjustments to prior year encumbrances of $133,000. So that $739,000 added to your beginning of the fund balance in the general fund, which was $2,317,000, and you ended up with a healthy fund balance at June 30th, 22 of $3,056,000. And you can kind of look at those other funds and see how they did as well. After that, you've got a budget to actual on page 6. What this is, it's got your general fund here in the middle of the page, and your special revenue funds are on the right-hand side of the page. Again, it's broken down by the same way as the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. What it's got is the first column there is original budget. That's the numbers that we set up when we do the estimate needs for you at the first of the year. That's based on estimates and historical money that you collect in the previous year. The final budget column would be if you had any supplemental appropriations, such as say you had a grant that came in after the estimate need was made that we didn't know about and needed to be put in there so you could spend it, we'd have supplemental appropriations. As you can see there on your general fund, the amounts are identical in the original and final budget column. That just simply means you didn't have any supplemental appropriations last year. You've got your actual column there that's the same as the schedule we looked at previously, and it's there so you can just look at it and see how we did budget to actual wise. Your special revenue funds is over there as well. Then after that, you got these notes and financial statements, and they just give a little bit more detail and maybe a little bit more narrative detail about the financial statements. They're mainly, some of it is for readers that might not be as up to how school districts do business as you guys are, but it starts out there with your reporting entity, defining that, the measurement focus used, then at the bottom of the page it goes into governmental funds, and then at the next page it gives you a definition for each one of those governmental funds and what it's used for, kind of what the general fund is, what it's used for, the building fund, the co-op fund, the child nutrition fund, and the municipal tax fund. Gives you just a little bit of information, just a summary definition of those funds and what they're used for. And then your fiduciary funds are down at the bottom. The next page over there on page 9 will show you, there in the middle of the page, it gives you the differences between generally accepted accounting principles and the regulatory basis of accounting. As I said before, most of those differences have to do with accruals. The regulatory basis of accounting doesn't accrue money as such as receivables and payables. It pretty much follows the cash basis of accounting. And those differences are shown there in the middle of the page on page 9. The bottom of that page goes just a little bit into the budgetary process that you have to use here at school. And then there's more definitions on page 10. There's a definition for just about every caption that's in the financial statements that we looked at previously, starting with the balance sheet and then on through there. And that goes on there at the in the middle of page 11. It starts defining your different revenue. It tells a little bit what's in local revenue, what's in state revenue, what's in federal revenue. Then it gets your OPAS expenditure function. So say somebody looked over there and saw you spend $1 million in support services. You can come back here to page 11. You can look under that definition, and you can get a little bit of an idea of what makes up support services. There on page 12, it talks about deposit categories of credit risk. First of all, it lists the 9 things in Oklahoma that you're permitted to invest in, and then it talks a little bit about your credit risk, your interest rate risk. Basically, one thing we do here is we go in like a couple of times during our audit. We pick a couple of times during the year that you all have the most money on hand here in your depository banks, and we make sure that the treasurer has required the depository bank to pledge collateral on top of the FDIC money to cover your deposits. The law requires that the treasurer has to require the bank to do that at all times, enough to cover you in case of a bank failure, and you wouldn't lose any money then because those pledges would take care of anything in addition to the FDIC. There on page 14, it talks about your general long-term debt. It's got a little summary there in the middle of that page on your general obligation bonds that were outstanding on June 30th, 2022. It's $4,325,000 altogether. Then down at the bottom of that page, there's a payout schedule. If you don't have any more, if you don't pass any more bonds, well, this payout schedule down here will show you what it takes to pay that $4,325,000 off. The next page has to do with your lease purchase agreements for equipment, including turf and signs. Those lease purchase agreements are considered capital leases, which are also considered to be debt. It's got a payout schedule there for the future years and the retirement of that principal and interest on those lease purchase agreements. And then down at the very bottom of page 15, there's a general long-term debt summary, which gives you the amount that was payable at the beginning of the year, amount of leases that was payable at the beginning of the year, any additions, any retirements, and then gives you your total debt payable there at the far right-hand side of page 15. On page 16, your employee retirement system, that's basically, most of that information is right out of the state retirement system's annual report. It's just some basic information about teachers' retirement. There, the last paragraph before you get to that number 5, annual pension costs, that'll give you some district-specific information, and then it shows the last 3 years' contributions that y'all schools made on behalf of your employees based on an approximate covered payroll there for 21-22 is about $17.7 million. The next page has to do with risk management. Basically, that just shows that you have insurance on all of your insurance in case of an act of God, some kind of disaster. You have insurance on your assets. You have health insurance, and you've got workers' comp insurance. Surety bonds are listed there. As you all know, there's a lot of positions in your school district that the state requires that you be bonded in certain amounts, and then that bond has to, the term has to cover the period of the audit. And so we make sure that those bonds are in place, and that sets those bonds out and who's required to be bonded there on number 7 and surety bonds. Number 8 is related entities. What that is that's the organizations that the board has chosen to sanction outside of the activity fund. It'd be like booster clubs and things of that nature. And they're down there just basically to show the reader that it's an arm's length transaction from the school district itself, and just because y'all sanction them, their financial statements and their numbers are not included in this audit report. After that, you get into that supplementary information I was talking about. Like say on page 18, this total on the far right hand side of page 18, it will be what the special revenue fund column on the balance sheet. What shows up in that special revenue column. And what this has done back here is just break that out to the different funds themselves, such as the building fund, co-op, child nutrition, municipal tax levy, so you can see what each one of them individually held at June 30th of 22. The next page is the same thing. It just shows it's broken. It's got the special revenue broken out, and it shows you your individual transactions or your individual to see how each one of those individual funds did during a year. You can look at the building fund, the co-op fund, the child nutrition, municipal tax fund, and that all comes down and shows you down at the bottom of the page what the fund balance was coming into this year we're in right now. And then the next 2 pages on page 20 and 21 does the same thing for the capital projects fund. The capital project fund makes up several of the bond issues, any of them that you have that have money in it, and they're all identified by a number, and that shows up in the balance sheet on page 20, a revenue expenditure and change in fund balance on page 21. And then on page 22, you've got a balance sheet for your fiduciary funds. That would be your activity fund and your gifts and endowment fund. It shows how much money was in there at June 30th, 2022. Page 23 is a revenue expenditure and change in fund balance on the expendable trust, which is your gifts and endowment fund. After that, you've got some more supplemental information. Rather than be special revenue on the budget to actual, but up in the front, what we looked at, it's going to show you a budget to actual for your building fund by itself there on page 24. You'll have a budget to actual for your child nutrition fund on page 25, your co-op fund on page 26, and your municipal tax fund on page 27. And those will all together, some summary up to the budget actual that we looked at before the notes to the financial statements. Then if I could get you to look on page 28. On page 28 is your schedule of federal awards expenditure. And it goes all the way on 29, some on page 30. But on the left-hand side of the page there, it'll show every one of the federal programs, the federal grants that McAllister Public School participated in during the 21-22 fiscal year. And then it's got some identifying information out to the right of there. And then you've got a balance, a receipt, and expenditure and a balance column going across there. Before I also would like to point out to you, on this particular schedule, any school district, any city, any kind of governmental entity that gets over $750,000 worth of federal money has to have what's referred to as a single audit. And the reason they call it that is because back when, I'm old enough to know, back in the day when I first started, well, schools would have auditors come out for just Title I money. They'd then come out and just audit the Title I, and then they'd have another auditor come out for like the ended ed program, and so on and so forth. And finally, the federal government said, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to assign all this auditing of all these programs to the independent auditor, which is myself. And when they did that, they put out a compliance manual. You know, we don't have books anymore, but when that first came out, it was about a foot thick. And it had every federal program that the federal government doled out money on. And there would be it was called a compliance supplement, and still is. And it has a couple of pages worth of suggested audit procedures on every one of these federal programs that you have here at your school. But because, you know, there's so many of them, what they said is for the independent auditor, what they wanted us to do is go in and pick major federal programs, which cover about 40% of your total federal money that you get here at the school. And when we select those major federal programs, those are the only ones that we have to go in and run all those audit tests out of that compliance manual. And those major federal programs are determined mainly by the amount of money that you get in certain ones of them, and also the newness of the program. If it's a relatively new program, it's considered a little bit more risky, so we'll pick that as a major federal program. But those major federal programs that were picked for this year are ones that have, on the far left-hand side, they have an asterisk behind them. And mainly that was your ARM, your ARP money, and your COVID, and your ESSER money, because you got so much of that last year, and it was those were such new programs, that those are what we chose. There on the page 29, you'll also see that your most of your special ed money, your IDEAB, flow-through, preschool, all the special ed money has asterisk by it. That was also chosen. And those particular programs were chosen for us to go to the compliance manual and run our audit test on that. And there are audit tests such as like eligibility, allowability of the expenditures. There's all kinds of things there. And there'll be another report that we'll go over here in just a minute that will talk about what we came up with when we ran those procedures. But I wanted to tell you that, and then tell you that over on page 30, it gives you a grand total of the expenditures that McAllister had during the 21-22 fiscal year, and it was like $7,967,000. So as you can see, a big chunk of y'all's money came from the federal government last year. So that's why they want to have a big part in the auditing of it. If you would look on over at page 32, 33, and 34, is simply y'all probably look at this every month, but this is a year's worth of information. It's got all your activity fund sub-accounts down the right-hand side, or left-hand side of the page. And then you've got your beginning balance at July 1, 2021. And everything that ran through there shows up on these pages. Everything that ran through that individual activity fund sub-account and what the balance was at the end of the year shows up over on the far right-hand side for each one of those sub-accounts. So you've got that information there for all your activity fund sub-accounts. Then you've got the other reports I was talking about. White Trawler will probably open on it because we're going to get to it here pretty quick. On page 36 is your report on internal control. I think I told you when I first came in, we do not actually audit internal controls. What we do is we come in and we look at the internal controls. We have to look at the internal controls in order to know, if we find that in an area, say in receipts, that we feel like you've not got as strong internal controls on, we'll put quite a few more audit tests in that area than if, say, we look at the disbursement cycle, say, and it looks like you've got some really good controls on that. We'll still look at it, we'll still put a pretty good amount of tests on it, but we don't put an extra amount on the ones that have strong internal controls. And the reason we look at these internal controls is for that reason. And when I say internal controls, I'm talking about Oh, well, everything that's in place to protect your assets and what have you, but it has a lot to do with the approval process. Like, we may take a transaction and walk it through the process as it goes through your school district to make sure that it's going very like it is designed to go through. And we also look at compatibility of duties. We look to make sure what your people do here and make sure that not one person is in a position where the duties are non-compatible. It would give them an opportunity to do something you wouldn't want them to do. A lot of that is internal control, and there's a lot more to it than that, but just to give you an idea. And anyway, we don't give an opinion on internal control, but we do look at it, and so when we look at it, they want us to write a report to tell you if you find anything that leads us to believe that you have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your internal control. And those significant deficiencies and material weaknesses are defined in this letter here on page 36 and 37. I'm not gonna read them to you. Y'all can read them yourself. But I will tell you that we found nothing that came to our attention to suggest that you had any significant deficiencies or any material weaknesses in your internal control. Your controls were strong in most every area. The next report, the last one there, page 38, is the one that I was telling you about. It has to do with the compliance with the major federal programs. We selected those programs that we chose as major, and we went in and we ran these audit tests that they suggest in their compliance manual on them. And this letter here on page 38, 39, and 40 will tell you that we found you all to be in substantial compliance with all the requirements of the major federal programs that you participated in here at the McAllister schools. Which that's a real good thing, because these last 2 years there's been a lot of federal money coming to the schools, and you know, it's been easy for some of these school districts not to spend it quite right. But y'all did a real good job there, and I think that's complimentary of your people. Page 41 is simply a summary of the things I've already told you. Basically, you had a qualified opinion on the regulatory basis of accounting. We found no audit findings reported deficiencies in internal control, or we found no instances of non-compliance material to the financial statements that were disclosed in the audit. There were no audit findings reported of deficiencies in the internal control over the major programs. Auditor report on compliance was unmodified, or that's basically a clean opinion on your federal programs. And then there, that number 7, it also identifies the programs, the major programs that we looked at again. And it's simply just a little summary there. And then on page 43, if I could draw your attention to page 43. Now, let me reiterate that we found no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your internal controls. Your main internal controls were fine. We reserve this, my firm does, on page 43 and 44, to bring things that maybe aren't internal control deficiencies, but they're things that might be a non-compliance or an issue that needs to be addressed, or we like to at least bring it to the attention of the board. There may be things that aren't near to the extent of a significant deficiency or material weakness, but you know, some of these things, if you just ignored them, they could actually turn into ones later on down the line. So we like to bring these up, and they're listed out there on page 43, and I'll go over them real quickly with you. Number 1 there has to do with when we were looking at the general fund purchase orders expenditures. There were 2 expenditures that represented payment of obligations for a previous fiscal year. The state of Oklahoma requires school districts, or it requires that any government actually spend the money in the year that they get it. And so all money at the end of the year that you haven't paid for yet has to be reserved for that year and paid for out of that year. You can't go on into the next fiscal year and pay for it out of that. It's a pay-as-you-go system. And there wasn't a lot of these, and so, you know, it had there been a lot, it might have been an internal control problem. We noticed 2 of them that were payment for obligations, and we just wanted to let you know that you're not supposed to have those. Number 2 there had to do with the general fund purchase order in the amount of $94,750 that was expended for a prefab building. The state statutes define what a capital expenditure is, and capital expenditures are prohibited from being paid out of the general fund. capital expenditures are supposed to be either a bond fund or a building fund expense. And it may be a situation where a few years ago, OEA came in and said, we want this law that says that schools can't pay for capital expenditures out of the general fund, so there could be more money to pay the teachers, who knows? But anyway, that law is there, and we need to comply with it, and we felt like this steel building met the definition of the capital expenditures, and that's not permitted in Oklahoma. Number 3 had to do with activity fund expenditures, and this just seems a little picky, but it is an area that, I mean, we have to be a little picky sometimes. This has to do with activity fund expenditures. When you go out and pay for the students or for the teachers or for anybody's meals. Anytime you have a situation where you're paying for meals, whether it's a team or whether it's a staff get together or whatever it is, there needs to be some kind of sign-in sheet. Or say, for instance, if you had like a football team or a basketball team or something like that, just take the roster and have the people go down and sign their name by it, that they participated in that expenditure. Otherwise, we don't really know as auditors whether you may have a family reunion or something, you know? I mean, it's a situation where it goes a little ways to show that the validity of that expenditure. Number 4 there, one employee chosen at random for our payroll contract test. We go in on a payroll and we look at quite a few. We pick a cross-section of employees, administrators, and what have you. And one of the people that we selected didn't have a contract on file for the 21-22 year. And, you know, there's supposed to be contracts for everybody. They should be on file. That could have been like could have been an oversight or whatever, but you need to have those contracts. They need to be on file for when the auditor comes and asks for them. The last one on page 44 has to do with this last one on page 44 has to do with the P2E2. And y'all may be more familiar with that than I am. But when it was brought to my attention, I did a little research on it, and it appears that somewhere in the prior years, the board had set up a committee called P2E2 to basically oversee your sanction organizations. And, you know, that's all well and good, except, you know, I think the people on it have changed and everything. And when we go back and we look at your sanctioning policies, which is what the Oklahoma law requires that you have, it's real clear and seems to be very adequate as far as I'm concerned, the board's sanctioning policies. And then if you just have your sanction organizations comply with those sanctioning policies, I don't see any need for any outside committee. And I'm just basically, that's something that y'all might want to just consider. This doesn't really have anything, I don't think it's against the law or anything like that to have this committee. It just seems like you're creating more of a burden by having a committee oversee your sanction organizations. When most school districts, in fact, I don't know of any other school district that doesn't just set their sanctioning policies and then have somebody make sure that the organizations are following those sanctioning policies. So we recommend that you consider doing away with it. And that's all, that's everything that we had. And as I said before, and it actually says on the top of page 43 that these conditions are not material weaknesses or toxicities. They're just areas that we noticed and that we want to bring to the attention of the board. And, you know, most of the time that gets the attention of everybody, and it's not there again, you know. It gets taken care of. Anybody have any questions? I went over that ultra fast, I know I did, and I'll go over any of it in any more detail if you'd like me to.
Good. I have some questions. Internally?
Yeah, for all these, I mean, are we required to issue a corrective action plan?
Yes, you will. Actually, it just basically is you just list that condition and you say what you're going to do to take care of it.
Right.
Then we come in the next year and make sure that you did what you said you were going to do. And that goes on by with the state, just so they'll know. Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
So my question on condition number 2,
Yes.
for the building, prefab building,
Mm-hmm.
you use the words, "this is not allowed in Oklahoma." So to me, that makes me think it's a pretty big deal. But then I hear you saying, yeah, these are just kind of things, right? So
Well,
what is-
the prefab building is allowed, it's a fact that it's purchased out of the.
No, I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying,
right.
but what I'm saying is you said that this procedure that we use, where we use the money from incorrectly,
Right.
is not allowed in Oklahoma. And to me, that's pretty important and carries a lot of weight. So what I'm saying to you is, it's in a report where you're saying, these are just some things and fix them, but that's a big thing to me. So is it a big thing or is it not a big thing?
Well, it's one of those things where the only way you could go back and fix this particular instance is make the general fund good out of the building fund with that money, and then you're a year and a half down the road now. I think if you just recognize the fact that capital outlay expenditures are defined and they can't be spent out of the general fund, and that you won't do it again, I think the state will accept your corrective action plan.
So is there, I mean, in your opinion?
In my opinion,
If I could finish.
I'm sorry.
In your estimation and what you've seen before, is this something that could be a potential big problem, even if fixed? Is it something that somebody could take and run with?
Well, if they were, they'd have to be looking for something to run with.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
I think we're good, thank you.
Thank y'all very much. I appreciate working for you.
Thank you. Safe travels. Okay, we're going to be moving on to 8, board reports. There are none. 9, superintendent reports and board discussion. 9.1, athletic director report, Mr. James Singleton.
Well, we've got a busy week this week. Winter sports are kind of going into playoff mode right now. Spring sports are starting this week. As far as wrestling girls actually went to regionals today at Salisaw, and Riley Phillips, she made day 2, so she's 2 matches away from making the state tournament. And girls wrestling boys regionals will be Friday and Saturday prior. Basketball, of course, they're playing tonight at Durant. I think our girls they lost by 5. So the boys are about to follow. But as far as basketball, as far as playoff seedings, our girls are currently seeded at 8. They're going to play Coweta at Sepulpa next Thursday. Really like their draw. Boys will open up against 4th-ranked Dell City next Thursday as well. It'll be a challenge, but they had a big win last Friday. They seem to be putting things together, so we're excited about that opportunity. Tomorrow is going to be senior night. It's also going to be peak out night. It's also going to be our last home game at Brumley for the season. Palm will also be performing tomorrow night. If you didn't hear, Palm was not able to go to nationals due to inclement weather. So they're going to do their nationals performance tomorrow night at halftime. Also, Drumline's going to perform tomorrow night and senior night will start at 6 o'clock. So a lot of festivities going on at Brumley Gymnasium tomorrow. We'd like for everybody to come out and be part of that. Tennis, our new head coach and former alum, Chris Burns, will kick off his career Tuesday at Bean. They'll actually be playing those games at East Central, but it'll be versus Bean. And then, of course, baseball, which made the state tournament last year. They have their first scrimmage this Friday at Mike Deep versus Muskogee, so we're excited to get those guys going. Track this past weekend went to the Westmore Indoor Meet at OU. Colin McMahon finished 4th in the high jump, and then our mile relay actually broke our school indoor record. So it was really cool. So like that. Soccer cranks up Thursday at Tahlequah, and we will also be hosting junior high and high school powerlifting this Thursday and Friday at the indoor. Varsity powerlifting team last week finished 2nd in their first powerlifting meet for the year. So as you can see, we've got a lot of activities going on. I'm excited for Wednesday nights a little bit. So it's going to be a lot going on. We're really excited. Got a lot of things going on. One of the things as far as our athletic department, something that was important to me when I had the opportunity to take over this position is for our student athletes to have opportunities to give back to our community. since I had an opportunity to really talk to you guys, these are kind of some of the things that we've got going on. Obviously, we started elementary reading program at Edmond Doyle with Ms. Hunt. Our athletes really enjoyed that. We had our first annual trunk or treat this year, which we felt like was a huge success at indoor. We had a lot of positive feedback on that. This year we also hosted our first OBI Christmas blood drive. Our goal was to have 15 donors, and we ended up with close to 45, so that turned out to be a really good deal. And then, of course, Coach Mason talked earlier. We had the opportunity to give to tornado relief for Ida Bell for the tornado. And today, finally, I was able to get Megan on the phone, and we are coordinating with her with Keep McAllister Beautiful, and we're going to adopt Chatty Park. So next Wednesday, our volleyball team will be going, and Megan will meet us there. She'll bring out gloves and pickers and trash. And I asked her, I said, well, should we do this every 2 weeks? And she said, well, easy now. She said, let's start with once a month and see how that goes as the weather gets better. So our goal is to do that once a month. We're really excited off that. We've also talked to Mr. Rock about helping him out at Harvest, doing some cleanup there at the park there at Harvest. So, giving back to our community, I feel like it's very important. And I've said it a million times that I've been very blessed in my coaching profession to be in some really big time towns that their towns really rally and support their teams. And since coming here, this place is second to none. And I feel like it's very important for our kids to obviously first and foremost understand that, but any opportunity to give back. So that being said, if you guys have anything coming up, anything you need help with, please feel free to call the athletic department office, and we'd be more than happy to rally the troops and get there and give our kids another opportunity to give back to our community. Go Bucks.
Thank you for that. Moving on, 9.2, we'll have our reports on from Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction. This is Delilah Rodriguez.
Okay, so we are into a new semester, and we had a lot of students. I wouldn't say a lot, but there were definitely, at the beginning of the semester, when people move during Christmas break, they don't always call us and tell us, they just don't show up. And so after 10 days, we drop them. That's whether it's at the beginning of the semester or in the middle of the semester, it doesn't matter. But even though we have that kind of transit time during Christmas, we're still up 10 students compared to last month. So that's really good that we have recovered from those numbers. Jefferson is up 4, William Gay is up 2, Edmond Doyle 1, Emerson 5, Will Rogers is down 2, Parker stayed exactly the same. Peterball is down 3, MHS is down 4, Key and Virgil are up by 7. So we've had some students who have gotten suspended for 180 days, according to our handbook for having things on campus they weren't supposed to. And so some of those have moved to virtual. So that's where some of those are down from Peterball High School that are now at the virtual setting. So looking at a plan for that to see what that's going to look like. Hopefully there's only a few here and there that we have to do that with. But not a lot of changes compared to last month as far as campus counts go. Any questions on the campus counts? I want to talk to you. We had a civil rights review, on-site review last week. We don't have our official report yet, but we should have it for sure at next month's board meeting. The guy that came, we were randomly selected because we get career tech funds. And so they mainly focus on the high school, but we had to submit to them all of our buildings from the time they were built, any renovations, additions for the whole district. But then they only focused on Foster High School. And so we met with him. They looked at Title IX, 504 IEP accommodations. They looked at ADA compliance, and it was a very informative visit. I was actually very thankful for it. A couple of things changed on Title IX as of 2020, and then Alan Doss is the one who met with us from the Career Tech. He said they're about to change again. So we'll be having to update that policy probably this summer. with the new guidelines for Title IX. But a couple of things that he did tell us that he wanted to see is any of our publications, like our posters that the athletics department makes with their different schedules, our newsletters that our principals sent home. There's a little tiny statement that says we will not discriminate against, that statement should be on everything. So his suggestion for social media was to put it in the about section, so it's just already there. As far as Title IX goes, there are some requirements that are new that we'll have on our website, like the training that I go through as a Title IX coordinator, and our policy, the reporting form, all on the website in one spot together. When Casey did the on-site at the high school, there were a lot of things that he found at the high school, just some little minor things like the knob on the bathroom sink. We have to have at least one that's not a round knob. So if you think someone who doesn't have full fingers, they need something to be able to grab onto. So it could be like a little plus sign, it could be a handle that is straight that you can move up and down. He said that, and the pipes under the sink need to be wrapped, because if they're in a wheelchair and they need to roll up to the sink, we don't want them burning there. Like little tiny things. He did mention that he was super impressed with our service animal policy. He said it was the best one he'd ever seen. So he was super excited about that. And then he gave us some really good ideas for human resources. He had asked us if we had a application rubric to decide who we were going to interview based on applications. And then also an interview rubric, how do we choose who gets the job when we interview? So he sent us some really good examples to look at so we can make our own. But it was very informative. He was really nice. Like I said, the formal report will be in. We have a year from when we get the report to make any of the adjustments that he gives us. So, do you guys have any questions about that? I do want to report, this is not on there, but we are going to state with robotics this year. So we just found that out today. So.
Hello. If you look on the first page of the board report, you'll see that our fund balance is creeping back up, but that in our general fund we do have a lot of encumbrances. For the year, that's partly because we have some huge projects coming out of ESSER money. All the HVAC for the new building and the HVAC for all the other buildings that they've replaced have come out, and those are waiting to be paid. Our building fund is pretty robust if you look at how much that we have in there, and child nutrition as well. And just a little side note on child nutrition, their costs this year on food are, like, it was $500,000 last year this time, it's over $800,000 this year. So they're doing very well though, but just note that those kind of things have really gone up. If you look on page 2 on the fund revenue, our ad valorem started coming in. I actually just got another check today. We're right on target to get our projected amount of revenue from ad valorem. Same with our county and state taxes collected. We're right on target for all those. Our collections are good. If you go on down to the 4,000s to the federal programs, you'll note that in this year's claims, we haven't claimed a lot. All of them, we've talked about this several times this year, that the federal funds department at the state was behind, which pushed us behind, and then on top of that, me being new to that. So there's been a lot of learning on all of our parts, but everything's been approved. All our applications have been approved, and we've started collecting and making those claims. I think our 795 ESSER money today just went through the first approval stage, and that's $1.8 million that will be right back into our account. And we haven't even made a Title I claim yet. So because that one literally just got approved last week. So we're doing really well there as well. And we're right on target to where we thought we would be. We actually got a little more consolidated title money, about another $13,000 they reallocated to us as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I don't have a major report, and I was gonna give Adrian props. He did an article on our internship program. I don't know if you guys saw that in the newspaper recently, but a dental association, national magazine, picked up that story. And Mr. Dixon has been contacted from some dental associations in Nebraska. They want to get that started in some of their schools. And so he's been talking with them and sharing with them what we're doing. And so that was kind of neat to get our information out about what we're doing with those kids. So.
And Dr. Seaver just said he doesn't have anything to add to that. So we're going to move on to 10, statement of consent agenda. 10.1, the following matters may be approved in their entirety by the board upon motion made, seconded, and passed by a majority vote of the board members. However, upon request by any board member, any one or more of said matters will be removed from the consent agenda and acted upon separately. Does anyone want any of the approval, or excuse me, any of the consent agenda removed? If not, I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda in its entirety.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
And I will second. Mrs. Few?
Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Yes.
So moving on to 13.1, discussion and possible board action to establish school sites and adjust attendance zones for students within the school district. So what that means is, like, for the 2023-2024 school year, we would close Jefferson Early Childhood Center, William Gay Early Childhood Center, and Edmund Doyle Elementary. And then for the 2023-2024 school year, it would be Carla Brock Early Childhood Academy, 3-year-olds through and pre-kindergarten, Will Rogers Elementary, kindergarten through 2nd grade, Peterville Upper Elementary, 3rd and 4th, Parker Intermediate Center, 5th and 6th, Randy Hughes Middle School, 7th and 8th, and McAllister High School, 9th through 12th. So I will accept a motion for these school sites and adjust the attendance zones for students within these districts.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Mrs. Few.
Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Ford? Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Moving on to 13.2, consideration of possible action on going into executive session to discuss employment and resignation and personnel as identified on the attached Exhibit A for the 2022-2023 school year, all in accordance with the provisions of 25 OS Section 307B1. I will make the motion to convene into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Pugh, sorry.
Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Mrs. Jimmy?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
It is 8:18 and we are now in executive session.
Are you the one messing with the lights? It went off once, and it came back on. Motion censored. That means something's about to run.
I wasn't. Motion sensor. Well, yeah, stays on for so long. I'll let it in the doorway, so
I was like, sir. Well, I saw him get up and go in there while I came on.
stayed on for so long.
Maybe Adrian says he's
I kept trying to explain to her, like, we don't have schools. And she said that in your district, kids need to know